In 1958, Americans turned on their TVs and saw something impossible. A family cruising down a highway, but the father wasn't touching the wheel. The mother wasn't braking. The kids weren't strapped in. The car was driving itself, effortlessly, smoothly, perfectly. It wasn't CGI. It wasn't a commercial trick. It wasn't a dream. It was real. General Motors and RCA had built a working prototype of an autonomous highway system. The car communicated with the road. The road guided the car. And for a brief moment, the world saw a future where humans didn't drive at all. Decades before Tesla, decades before Google, decades before LiDAR, neural nets, machine learning, or computer vision, America had self-driving cars. And then it threw the future away. This is the story of how we had autonomy in the 1950s and why we chose a world of traffic, chaos, and accidents instead. Welcome to Missed Futures, the series where we explore the visions that came too early and the people who paid the price for building tomorrow long before the world was ready to accept it. And few futures were abandoned more completely or more tragically than the autonomous highway system of 1958. To understand how shocking this was, you need to understand the mindset of post-war America. The 1950s were obsessed with the future. Robot kitchens, jetpacks, nuclear-powered everything, concept cars shaped like rockets. It was the golden age of tomorrow, and no company embraced that spirit more than General Motors. GM's Motorama shows were legendary, giant showcases of the future of transportation. Millions of visitors saw concept cars decades ahead of their time. Massive glass domes, radar antennas, high-speed highways, electric guidance systems. But one idea towered above all the others: the automated highway. A road that could think, a car that could obey, and a future where driving would become effortless. The tech behind it wasn't science fiction. RCA built wires into the pavement, sending electromagnetic signals up into sensors under the car. Those signals told the car when to steer, when to speed up, when to slow down. If obstacles appeared, the system detected them through radar-style inductive loops. It wasn't AI. It was infrastructure intelligence. The road did the thinking, the car followed. Engineers called it fail-proof. Journalists called it magic. Politicians called it the future of America. And unlike most 1950s predictions, this one actually worked. GM built a real test track in Arizona. Real cars, real roads, real autonomy. They demonstrated hands-free lane guidance, hands-free curves, automatic passing, collision avoidance. In one test, engineers sat with their hands folded while the car navigated an entire stretch by itself. It wasn't a dream. It was a demo. The world's first working autonomous vehicle system existed before the Beatles formed. So why didn't it happen? Because the future collided with the biggest force in American history: the highway system. In 1956, the U.S. government passed the Federal Aid Highway Act, the largest infrastructure project ever approved. 41,000 miles of interstate, hundreds of billions of dollars in today's money, the spine of America. And that money came with rules. Highways had to be simple, standardized, cheap, not intelligent, not wired, not futuristic. The government didn't want a sci-fi highway system. They wanted concrete, fast, now, everywhere. GM's autonomous dream required advanced roads, millions of sensors, and miles of smart pavement. Politicians didn't want that. Contractors didn't want that. Oil companies didn't want that. Insurance companies definitely didn't want that. Autonomous highways would reduce accidents. Insurance companies needed accidents. Oil companies needed traffic. Contractors needed endless construction. Everyone had something to lose. So the project died quietly, not with a press conference, with silence. As the 1960s arrived, America traded autonomy for horsepower. Muscle cars replaced smart cars. The dream of effortless driving became the dream of loud engines. Safety took a back seat, innovation took a back seat, the future took a back seat. The Arizona test track closed. The prototypes were scrapped. The blueprints were shelved. And the autonomous highway, perhaps the most important idea in transportation, vanished. Instead of building intelligent highways, America built faster highways. And with them came decades of consequences: traffic congestion, drunk driving, accidents, pollution, urban sprawl, chaotic car culture. The very problems autonomy would have solved. And the saddest part? By the 1970s, the cost of retrofitting intelligent highways became enormous. By the 80s, almost impossible. By the 90s, too expensive to justify. By the 2000s, the US had given up completely. The future had slipped away. Meanwhile, the rest of the world kept dreaming. Japan experimented with intelligent highways in the 1980s. Europe tested lane guidance systems. Some cities explored inductive pavement for buses. But no one matched what GM demonstrated in the 1950s. Because by then, autonomy had shifted away from infrastructure into vehicles. Computers were getting smaller. Sensors were getting better. AI was emerging. The question changed from, how do we make the road smart, to, how do we make the car smart? The shift was inevitable and slow. Then, a private company changed everything. In the 2010s, Tesla promised autonomy from onboard computers instead of infrastructure. Google launched Waymo. China began massive investments in autonomous tech. Suddenly, the dream GM had shown the world was reborn, just in a different form. Not road intelligence, car intelligence. But here's the irony. Modern AI-based autonomy is far more complex than the 1950 solution. We're trying to teach cars to perceive the world manually, detect objects, predict motion, navigate chaos, understand uncertainty, instead of letting the road tell them what to do. GM's 1958 system wasn't outdated. It was smarter. In many ways, we replaced the simplest autonomy with the hardest autonomy because we refused to invest in infrastructure when it mattered. So what if the US had chosen smart highways over simple highways? What if 1958 had been the birth of autonomy instead of a dead end? Imagine the world. Self-driving commutes in the 1960s. Zero highway fatalities by the 70s. Intelligent transport networks by the 80s. Connected mobility by the 90s. And true autonomous cities by the 2000s. Autonomous trucking, autonomous public transit, autonomous freight, autonomous taxis, decades before Uber existed. Not because Silicon Valley invented it, but because GM and RCA already built it. The world would be unrecognizable. Instead, we waited 60 years for autonomy to return. And today we still struggle with it, because the world abandoned its simplest path to the future the moment it mattered most. The story of GM's autonomous highway isn't about failure. It's about timing. It's about politics. It's about fear. It's about a nation choosing speed over wisdom and spectacle over progress. The idea was right. The decade was wrong. And the cost of that mistake is a world still trying to solve a problem that was already solved in the 1950s. For a brief moment, the road knew where to go, and we chose not to follow it. This was Missed Futures, where we uncover the visions that came too early and the future that slipped through our fingers. Subscribe and join us next time. The next lost future is already waiting.